Hi, it's Penny here, and today we're going to be wrapping up all the books that I read in September. I'm actually going to split this into two parts because I did read 11 books in September and I don't want this video to be too long. So in this video I'm going to focus on the fantasy books that I read, and then in the next one I'll do the sci-fi and the thrillers. I do have one supernatural thriller that I've moved back and forth between the two parts, but I think I'll save it for the other part. And as usual, I am going to do this book battle style, which means that I will pair up all the books, battle them against each other, and eventually come up with the champion of the month. So this video will be deciding what was the best fantasy that I read in September. So let's get into talking about the books. Our first battle is going to be between two older fantasies that I read. So we've got The Glass Dragon by Irene Radford up against The Last Wizard by Tanya Huff. So The Glass Dragon is the first book in a longer series. I don't actually know how many books there are, but I believe that there's a lot more than I thought. I actually picked this omnibus of the first 3 books up from a charity shop for $2, which is why I had this. And I'd heard of Irene Radford before. So this fantasy is set in a really interesting world. We've got these dragons that initially start out more substantial, but as they get older they turn more transparent and glass-like. But as well, it's the dragons that fuel the magic in the world. Unfortunately, the dragons have kind of been attacked because people don't trust them. You know, they attack the herds and stuff. So people have hunted the dragons down, and there's now only one breeding female left. As well, the royalty of this kingdom is linked in with the dragons, so since the dragons are struggling, the king is now incredibly sick, and as well, the prince is missing. So in this book, primarily we're following this young wizard who's trying to track down the prince, although he doesn't entirely know that's what he's meant to be doing, as well as this woman who, women aren't supposed to have magic, but she does. And she's formed a friendship with this dragon. I really loved the initial setup of the story. The world is so interesting. The magic has a lot of potential. But unfortunately, it mostly focused on this romance, and it also introduced this kind of stupid love triangle. And a lot of the things that were happening in the plot felt quite random and directionless. So in the end, I kind of ended up quite unsatisfied. In fact, I would say the thing that was probably my favorite in this was the bad guy. You get little bits of monologue from his thought processes, and those bits, they're kind of terrible, but I found them also kind of hilarious. But yeah, overall, I would say there's a lot of potential in this world, so I might continue the series, but also I was a little bit disappointed in the end. So then we have The Last Wizard, which is the second book in a duology. In the first book, we have this girl named Crystal who has these magical powers, and she's fighting against this big evil wizard, the last of the wizards, or kind of Crystal's the last wizard. So then this second book is really following on what Crystal's life is like as she's trying to find purpose after she's kind of defeated this big evil and she doesn't really know what else to do. As well, Crystal was kind of formed using these 7 different goddesses, and those goddesses are now trying to free themselves, which is causing herself to kind of fracture, which I really enjoyed that aspect. As well, one of the characters in the story is Death himself, and in fact he's one of Crystal's love interests. And I really wish we had gotten more of this romance between Crystal and Death, and more of the goddesses as well. Unfortunately, a lot of the story focused on Crystal's relationship with these 2 stupid, boring human people, and they were kind of going on a quest. Again, it felt quite directionless and like things were just happening, but it wasn't really a cohesive story. So once again, it was a story that I felt like had a lot of potential, but it didn't focus on the thing I wanted. It focused on some other nonsense romance stuff. And even part of what I wanted was the romance, but not the romance I was getting. So overall, I ended up a bit disappointed in this one as well. But there were parts I really loved. So I think if I'm putting these 2 books up against each other, I'm probably going to go with The Last Wizard, just because there were a lot more parts of that I really loved. But both of these books had so much potential. Oh, so frustrating. Okay, then our next battle is going to be between 2 books by Māori authors. First up, we've got Falling into Rarohenga by Steph Matuku up against Ngake Whātaitai by Ben Naya. So Falling into Rarohenga was a really fun book. I would say it's kind of targeted at the younger end of YA, maybe middle grade. Basically, we've got these 2 twins and they're very different, so they don't really get along. The girl is very studious and the boy is more sporty and kind of a troublemaker. They're both kind of dealing with the fact that their father had gone to prison and has separated with their mother. So within this book, it does deal with some quite serious topics while also being a lot of fun. Basically, these 2 twins, after having an argument, get home from school and discover that there's a giant hole through to the underworld in their mother's room, and they end up having to go into the underworld to try and save their mother. While they're doing that, they kind of come to terms with the stuff that's going on with their father and learn to get along with each other. But also the story has a lot of Maori mythology incorporated into it. And just overall, it was a lot of fun. Every chapter was super short, so it was super fast paced, and I just had so much fun. And I do now want to go and do some research more about Maori mythology, especially like the Maori underworld and what that's like. So I definitely recommend this one if you're looking for a younger, fun book to read. Then we have Ngake Whātaitai. So this one is a Maori children's book. I've got it here. I thought it would be nice to show you what it's really like. So it's basically just really beautiful pictures of these two taniwha and how they were involved in the formation of Wellington, which is the capital city in New Zealand. The pictures are really beautiful. I just really love the color scheme that's been chosen. But also, all the words are in Maori. So I had to do quite a lot of Googling to read this, but I did still really enjoy the learning experience. And I would like to improve my Maori, so maybe I could read this more naturally. I really can't say what the experience would be like for a child who actually understands Maori, because that's not me, but I still really enjoyed having this book, and it's just really super beautiful. So if I'm putting these two books up against each other, I think even though I really liked Ngake Whātaitai, I just had so much fun with falling into Rarohenga that I can't not put that through to the semi-finals. And I'm definitely going to be reading more stuff by Steph Matuku in the future, because I also read The Flight of the Fantail by her, and it was the same kind of level of like being fast-paced and fun and just a great time. So I do have one more book to talk about, but before we get into that one, what I'm going to do is battle The Last Wizard up against Falling into Rarohenga, and that'll decide the book we're going to take forward into the final. Also, let's be honest, it's not a very hard battle. The first two books were super disappointing. The Last Wizard, I had so many hopes for it, but it didn't deliver. So if we're putting it up against Falling into Rarohenga, which I just had such a great experience reading, then obviously I pick Falling into Rarohenga to go through to the finals. Right, so now we're going to be into the finals, and I'm introducing the one fantasy audiobook that I read. So we're going to have The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch up against Falling into Rarohenga by Steph Matuku. So The Republic of Thieves is the third book in the Gentleman Bastards series. We're continuing to follow Locke and his band of thieves as they pull off different cons. Locke and his friends have gone through some pretty hard times in the last two books, so they're kind of struggling, and they are roped into rigging this election. While they're doing that, they also run into Sabitha, the love of Locke's life, and I kind of knew from the first two books that I was going to love Sabitha, and I was right. I love Sabitha. She's just such an interesting character and such a strong woman. I get a little bit frustrated with Locke kind of insta-loving her, and she gets annoyed at him for that same thing. But at the same time, I insta-love her, so I can't really fault him for it. I do think the election plot, I definitely tuned out on the details a bit sometimes, which might have been the audiobook, but also I don't care that much about politics. Even politics that have a whole bunch of bond majors involved in it, still don't care. So I kind of skipped over the details a little bit, but I still followed it well enough that the twist at the end was really engaging, and I love the ending of this. As well as this election, we're also kind of interleaving the story of Locke meeting Sabitha when he was a young child, learning to be a thief, and kind of this trip they went on where they were part of this acting troupe, but while they were there, they ended up involved in murder and corruption and just all the kind of stuff they always seem to get involved in. So that story was also a lot of fun, and of course it had Sabitha in it, so I liked it. Although seeing all the really stupid things that Locke did really put me on the side of Sabitha and being annoyed with him. And then the ending. The ending really set up the rest of the story, and there's a potential for the story to go in some really amazing directions. However, the fourth book was meant to come out several years ago, and we're still waiting. People keep telling me it's coming out this year, but is it? Is it? I have my doubts. And I'm glad that I didn't read it until now, because like, I don't really want to wait to find out what happens next. And I'm going to have to, but at least I haven't been waiting as long as people who read the book when it first came out. So if I'm putting The Republic of Thieves up against Falling into Rarohenga, it's a little bit hard because they're such different books and they're trying to do such different things. Both of them are quite fun, but I would say Falling into Rarohenga is like more fast-paced and like it doesn't really try to be super clever, whereas the Republic of Thieves does try to be clever, and it did a better job than the second book in that series, but maybe it's still a little bit, you know, impressed with its own cleverness. But that's Locke in general, so it kind of fits with the character. I mean, the simple fact is that if you're a younger audience, falling into Rarohenga would be amazing for you. If you're an older audience who likes really clever fantasy with tricksy plots and great characters, then you would like Republic of Thieves. I enjoyed both of them, but since I'm an adult, I'm going to go with Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch. So that's the best fantasy book that I read in the month of September. Do check back in a couple of days when I'll have the second part up and I'll go through my science fictions and my thrillers, and we will see which was the best of those and what was the best book of the month overall. And of course, do let me know if you have read any of these books, then I would love to talk with you more about them down in the comments, or let me know if you're interested in reading any of them now that I've shared my thoughts with you. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.